This girl exposes a nurse accused of a terrible crime, but when they discover the truth about her, everyone is shocked. Comment with a score from 0 to 10 for my story. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. The March rain hammered down on the streets of Beacon Hills, turning the asphalt into mirrors that reflected the lights of St. Serafina Hospital. Antonella pressed herself against the building's cold wall, her 4 years insufficient to grasp why she needed to hide from the passers-by. Her wet clothes clung to her thin body, and she shivered when she saw the hospital security guards approaching again. "Get out of here, kid," growled the man in the blue uniform. "How many times do I have to tell you? This isn't a place for beggars." Antonella cast down her large dark eyes, but didn't move. There was something going on inside that she needed to understand, something that kept her coming back every day, despite the shouting and threats. During the long hours spent waiting for loose change or scraps of food, she had developed a memory that registered every detail, every suspicious movement she saw through the illuminated windows. The wail of an ambulance cut through the afternoon air as she reluctantly backed away from the main entrance. Through the rain, she watched paramedics pull a middle-aged man from the vehicle, his business suit stained with blood and dirt. David Thompson, owner of Thompson Textiles, had suffered a severe fall at his textile factory 2 hours earlier. Antonella tracked the movement through the emergency entrance, her bare feet making little noise on the wet ground. She knew every hallway of that hospital, every hiding spot where she could observe without being seen. It was a skill she had developed out of necessity, living on the streets for as long as she could remember. David was wheeled onto a gurney in the emergency corridor, his consciousness flickering between moments of clarity and confusion. The pain in his left leg was intense, but something in his business instinct remained alert. 30 years of building a family business had taught him to observe details, even in moments of vulnerability. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to administer a painkiller to ease the discomfort," said a feminine voice near his gurney. David opened his eyes and saw Zelda Morgan, the head nurse of the emergency department, preparing a syringe. Something about her expression bothered him, a coldness that contrasted with the professional smile she maintained. Her eyes scanned the expensive watch on his wrist, his quality clothes, calculating something he couldn't fully decipher. "Has your family been notified?" Zelda asked, administering the injection with more force than necessary. "I live alone," David replied, feeling a strange drowsiness take hold. "I don't have a close family." Zelda's smile widened imperceptibly. During her 8 years working in the ER, she had quickly learned to identify patients who might be more lucrative. Men like David Thompson, solitary businessmen with financial resources, represented special opportunities. Antonella watched everything from her hiding spot behind the medication cart. There was something familiar about that nurse, something that awakened fragmented memories of her previous life. Zelda Morgan always drew her attention, not just for the authority she wielded over other staff, but for the way her eyes changed when she looked at certain patients. The medication took effect quickly, and David felt his consciousness slipping. But before he fully drifted off, he heard a child's voice urgently whispering near his ear. "You need to be careful of her." David forced his eyes open and saw Antonella's small face leaning over him, her eyes conveying a disturbing seriousness for such a young child. "Nurse Zelda, she made 3 people worse on purpose," Antonella whispered quickly, glancing nervously around. "When the families don't give her money, she lets them suffer more." Before David could respond, the drowsiness completely overcame him. But the girl's words echoed in his mind even in unconsciousness, planting a seed of suspicion that would grow in the following days. Zelda returned a few minutes later and frowned, seeing that the area around David's gurney was empty. She was sure she had seen a small shadow there, but now there was no one. She checked David's vital signs and jotted down information on her clipboard, already formulating plans for the coming days. Antonella had hidden again, but continued watching. During her countless hours wandering the hospital corridors, she had witnessed scenes that her childlike mind registered with photographic precision. She had seen Zelda talking in whispers with desperate family members, seen envelopes passing from hand to hand when the doctors weren't looking, seen the nurse deliberately delaying medications or swapping IV bags when she detected that a family couldn't afford special care. The rain continued to beat against the windows when David was transferred to a room on the second floor. Antonella followed him from a distance, her steps as silent as shadows. There was something about that man that sparked her compassion, a loneliness she recognized in herself. During the night, while David slept under the effect of the medication, Antonella approached his window. From outside, she watched through the steamed-up glass, quietly humming a melody her mother used to sing before everything went wrong in her life. David briefly awoke in the middle of the night, his vision still blurry from the painkillers. For a moment, he thought he saw a child's face in the window, but when he blinked again, no one was there. Only the incessant rain and the distant echo of a sad song that seemed to come from his own lost memories. Zelda made her nightly rounds punctually at 3 in the morning, checking on each patient with her characteristic cold efficiency. When she reached David's room, she lingered longer than necessary, studying the sleeping man. Her eyes again scanned the signs of wealth, the watch, the Italian shoes left beside the bed, the fine texture of his accident-ripped clothing. The next morning, David woke with an intense headache and terrible thirst. He tried to reach the glass of water on the bedside table, but his coordination was still impaired. That's when he heard light footsteps approaching and saw Antonella cautiously entering his room. "How did you get in here?" David asked, his voice rough. "I know all the ways," she replied simply, offering him the glass of water. "Are you feeling worse than yesterday?" David drank the water gratefully and studied the girl's serious face. "Why did you say that about the nurse?" Antonella glanced at the door before answering. "Because I saw it. I see everything that happens here, and Zelda charges families money to take better care of the sick. When they don't pay, she makes them stay sick longer." The coldness with which the child spoke those words shocked David. There was a disturbing maturity in her eyes, as if she had seen things no child should witness. "And you don't have family. Where are your parents?" Antonella's face instantly closed off. "They left. Now I take care of myself." Before David could ask more questions, they heard firm footsteps approaching in the corridor. Antonella quickly stood up, heading toward the window. "She's coming," she whispered. "Remember what I said." The girl disappeared through the window with an agility that surprised David, leaving him questioning whether the entire conversation had been real or just the effect of the medication. Seconds later, Zelda entered the room with her professional smile, carrying a tray of medications. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. How are you feeling today?" David observed her with new eyes, searching for signs of the calculating coldness Antonella had described. And for the first time, he began to question whether his recovery was truly following the normal course it should be. David spent the next 3 days observing Zelda's every move with growing unease. The nurse always arrived punctually to administer his medications, but something in her gestures confirmed his suspicions. When she thought he wasn't paying attention, her eyes examined his belongings with an almost palpable hunger. "Mr. Thompson, I need you to sign some papers regarding your health insurance," Zelda said on Thursday morning, approaching with a clipboard. "It's just formalities to ensure you receive the best possible treatment." David took the documents and pretended to read them, but his attention was focused on Zelda's expression. There was ill-disguised anxiety in her eyes, as if she were testing his willingness to cooperate financially. "I see you have a premium plan," she continued, pointing to a specific clause. "This allows me to arrange more personalized care. Of course, this requires a small administrative fee that isn't covered by the plan." David looked up from the papers. "What kind of fee?" "Well, considering your status and the complexity of your case, it would be around $5,000 to ensure you receive priority attention and the best available medications." The coolness with which she made the proposal shocked David. There was the confirmation of everything Antonella had said. Zelda Morgan was literally charging a bribe for basic medical care. "I need to think about it," David replied cautiously. Zelda's smile hardened almost imperceptibly. Of course. But don't take too long. Sometimes the spots for priority treatment fill up quickly." After she left, David was alone with his turbulent thoughts. As a businessman, he recognized extortion when he saw it. But he was vulnerable, dependent on medical care, and that made the situation particularly dangerous. That afternoon, Antonella appeared again at his window. This time she brought small wildflowers. She had collected from the hospital grounds. "So you don't feel sad?" she said, offering the flowers through the slightly opened window. "How did you know I was sad?" David asked, touched by the gesture. "Your eyes looked the same as mine when I found out no one was coming back for me," Antonella replied, with the brutal honesty only children possess. David felt a pang in his chest. "Antonella, can I ask you something?" "Why do you care about me?" "You don't even know me." The girl thought for a moment before answering. "Because you looked at me like I was a real person. Most people pretend I'm invisible." Those words touched something deep in David. He himself had spent years isolating himself from people, building emotional walls, after losing his wife and being forced to abandon his young daughter 15 years ago due to the financial pressures of keeping the family business afloat. "Antonella, tell me more about what you saw Nurse Zelda doing." The girl's eyes became serious again. "Yesterday I saw her talking to Mr. Santos's family from room 204. He was very sick, needing strong medicine, but she said it would take a long time to arrive. Then his daughter gave her an envelope and suddenly the medicine appeared." "Are you sure of what you saw?" "I have a very good memory," Antonella said proudly. "My mom always said I remembered everything, even the small things adults forget." David studied the girl's serious face. "And your mom? What happened to her?" Antonella's expression closed again. "She got very sick. They brought her here once, but she didn't get better. After that, no one wanted to stay with me." David's heart broke. That child had lost everything and still found the strength to worry about a stranger. "Antonella, where do you sleep? How do you eat?" "There's a place behind the hospital laundry where it's warm. And sometimes people give me food, or I find things in the trash that are still good." The casual description of the girl's street life horrified David. He had spent years focused exclusively on his business, ignoring the suffering around him. Seeing Antonella, he felt the universe was giving him a second chance to do the right thing. "Listen, I want to help you. When I get out of here—" "No," Antonella interrupted quickly. "You can't. If she finds out you're helping me, she'll make you worse. I've seen it happen before." Just then they heard approaching footsteps in the corridor. Antonella prepared to leave, but before she did, she whispered urgently, "You need to talk to Dr. Cordero. She's good. Unlike Aunt Zelda, she can help." The girl disappeared through the window, seconds before Zelda entered the room. This time the nurse wasn't alone. Accompanying her was a sturdy, middle-aged man she introduced as Dr. Alcock. "Mr. Thompson, I brought in Dr. Alcock for a second opinion on your case," Zelda said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He believes you may need a more complex procedure than we initially thought." Dr. Alcock examined David with an efficiency that seemed rehearsed. "Yes, I see signs of complications here that could worsen if not treated properly. Fortunately, we have a new treatment protocol that has shown excellent results." "What kind of protocol?" David asked, suspicious. "Imported medications, specialized therapies," Zelda quickly responded. "Of course, this requires special approval and some additional costs, but the results are worth the investment." David realized they were escalating the pressure. Not only did they want the initial bribe, but now they were inventing non-existent complications to justify even higher costs. "I need time to contact my lawyer and review the options," David said firmly. Zelda's expression hardened completely. "Mr. Thompson, time is something you might not have much of. These complications can escalate quickly." After they left, David was alone, with a growing sense of danger. They weren't just extortionists, they were predators, taking advantage of vulnerable people in their time of greatest need. That night he had trouble sleeping. Around 2 in the morning, he felt a terrible thirst and tried to reach the glass of water on the bedside table. To his surprise, it was empty, although he was certain it was full when he lay down. Walking slowly to the bathroom to refill the glass, David started to feel dizzy. His legs seemed unresponsive, and a strange nausea overcame him. He managed to return to bed with difficulty, but spent the rest of the night awake, questioning whether his water had been tampered with. The next morning, Dr. Fatima Cordero arrived to make her morning rounds. David had heard about her from other patients. A respected physician who had worked at the hospital for 20 years and was known for her genuine dedication. "How are you feeling, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, checking his blood pressure. "Doctor, can I speak with you privately?" Fatima noticed the urgency in his voice and closed the door. "Of course. What's going on?" David hesitated for a moment, then decided to trust his intuition. "Doctor, I have reasons to believe someone is trying to prolong my stay for financial reasons." Fatima raised her eyebrows. "Those are very serious accusations. Can you give me more details? Nurse Zelda has been pressuring me to pay additional fees not covered by the plan. And last night, I had strange symptoms that didn't seem related to my original accident." Fatima was silent for a long moment, processing the information. During her years at the hospital, she had heard rumors of irregularities, but she never had concrete evidence. "Mr. Thompson, these accusations, if true, represent grave violations of medical ethics. Do you have concrete evidence?" David thought of Antonella and the things she had witnessed, but he hesitated to involve a vulnerable child in something potentially dangerous. "Not yet, but I can get some. Doctor, I need your help, not just for me, but for other patients who might be going through the same thing." Fatima studied David's face, recognizing the sincerity in his eyes. "I will investigate discreetly, but you need to be very careful. If your suspicions are correct, you could be in real danger." Just then, the door abruptly opened and Zelda entered, interrupting the conversation. Her gaze quickly swept over David and Fatima's faces, detecting the tension in the air. "Dr. Cordero, I didn't know you were consulting here," Zelda said with a forced smile. "Mr. Thompson is under my special care." "Just a routine checkup," Fatima replied calmly. "Everything seems normal." After Fatima left, Zelda remained in the room longer than necessary, organizing medications that were already organized, clearly trying to assess what had been discussed. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you aren't listening to unnecessary rumors about our procedures," she finally said. "Sometimes patients get confused about medical protocols." David watched her carefully. "Of course not. I completely trust the competence of the team." But both knew the war had begun, and David realized his life depended on exposing Zelda before she decided he posed too great a threat to be tolerated. 2 days after the conversation with Dr. Cordero, David woke up feeling worse than at any point since his admission. His vision was blurry, his heart was beating irregularly, and an inexplicable weakness had taken hold of his body. When he tried to call for help, he discovered his voice came out only as a hoarse whisper. Zelda appeared promptly for his morning medication, but this time her smile was different. There was a cruel satisfaction in her eyes that confirmed David's worst fears. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Thompson?" she asked, preparing a syringe with a liquid that seemed denser than usual. "You look a little pale." David tried to protest, but his voice wouldn't obey. Zelda applied the injection with deliberate slowness, as if savoring every moment of his vulnerability. "You know, Mr. Thompson, I've been thinking a lot about our previous conversation. Sometimes when patients don't cooperate with recommended protocols, their recovery can become more complicated." As the medication took effect, David felt his consciousness slipping again. But before he fully drifted off, he heard light footsteps at the window and saw Antonella's worried face watching through the glass. The girl had spent the entire night hidden in the hospital gardens, observing Zelda's nocturnal movements. Her photographic memory had registered something disturbing. The nurse leaving the pharmacy with vials she didn't usually carry, and whispering with Dr. Alcock about speeding up the process. When David woke up hours later, Antonella was sitting silently beside his bed. She had managed to enter the room through a perpetually faulty bathroom window. "She's poisoning you," Antonella whispered without preamble. "I saw her mixing different medicines in your syringe." David tried to speak, but was still struggling. Antonella brought him a glass of clean water she had managed to get from the hospital kitchen and helped him drink slowly. "I need to warn Dr. Cordero," David managed to murmur. "You can't. She's out of town for a conference in Denver. She won't be back until Monday," Antonella replied. "I heard the nurses talking." Desperation washed over David. Fatima was his only ally in the hospital, and now he was alone for 3 days with Zelda having complete control over his treatment. "Antonella, I need to get out of here. You can't just leave so weak. She'll say you had a breakdown and bring you right back," the girl explained with disturbing wisdom. "But I have an idea." Antonella recounted that she knew Maria Jones, a woman who had cleaned the hospital for 15 years and was always kind to her. Maria Jones had lost a granddaughter Antonella's age in an accident, and since then treated the girl with maternal affection. "She can help us. But Maria has seen strange things happening too, but she's afraid to speak up because she needs her job." That afternoon, while David pretended to sleep, Antonella brought Maria Jones to meet him. The 58-year-old woman observed David's weakened state with growing indignation. "Mr. Thompson, I've worked here for 15 years, and I've never seen a patient decline this much without a medical reason," Maria Jones said in a low voice. "And this little girl here told me things that make my blood boil." Maria Jones revealed that she had witnessed several suspicious situations involving Zelda, but never had the courage to report it due to the political influence of the Morgan family in the hospital administration. Her uncle Gus Morgan has been a city councilman for 20 years. "He got Zelda the job and she hides behind the family name," Maria Jones explained. "But I keep the master keys to all the departments. I might be able to get evidence." David felt a glimmer of hope. "What kind of evidence?" "And the medication logs, security camera footage, documents she hides in the administrative office closet," Maria Jones replied. "But if I get caught, I'll lose my job and my pension." Antonella held Maria Jones's hand. "Aunt Maria, remember your granddaughter? You always say she would want you to help other kids." Maria Jones's eyes filled with tears. "You're right, my little one. Caroline wouldn't forgive me if I stood by and watched people suffer." That night, as the hospital grew quieter, Maria Jones began her dangerous mission. Using her master keys, she accessed Zelda's administrative office and began photographing documents with a cell phone borrowed from Antonella, who had found the device in the trash a few weeks earlier. What Maria Jones discovered exceeded her worst expectations. Zelda kept detailed records of her extortions, including amounts charged to different families, diverted medications, and even a list of problem patients who received sabotage treatment. Meanwhile, Antonella kept watch in the corridor, using her ability to move invisibly through the halls to alert them to any suspicious movement. That's how she saw Zelda unexpectedly returning to the hospital at 2 in the morning. The girl ran silently to the administrative office and urgently whispered to Maria Jones, "She's coming." Maria Jones was still photographing the last document when they heard Zelda's footsteps approaching. In a panic, she quickly put the papers away and hid behind the filing cabinet, while Antonella disappeared through a side window. Zelda entered the room and immediately noticed something was out of place. Her documents were slightly disarranged, and there was a different smell in the air. Her eyes scanned every corner of the room, but Maria Jones was well hidden in the shadows. After a few tense minutes, Zelda left the room, but not before locking the main filing cabinet with a key she carried with her. She had realized someone was investigating her activities. The next morning, Zelda arrived at David's room with a particularly dark expression. This time, she brought a syringe with an almost black liquid that made David's heart race with fear. "Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid your condition deteriorated significantly overnight," she said with false concern. "I'll need to administer a very strong medication to stabilize your vitals." David tried to resist, but his physical weakness prevented him from offering any real opposition. It was at that moment that the door burst open and an authoritative voice echoed through the room. "Stop right there!" Everyone turned to see Dr. Cordero in the doorway, accompanied by 2 hospital security guards and a man David didn't recognize who was carrying an official briefcase. "Dr. Cordero, I thought you were traveling," Zelda stammered, trying to hide the syringe behind her back. "I cancelled my trip when I received some very disturbing information about irregularities in this department," Cordero replied coolly. "This is Dr. Henry Sullivan, an inspector from the State Board of Health." Dr. Sullivan approached Zelda. "Nurse Morgan, I need you to hand over that syringe and all the medication you were preparing to administer." Zelda hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the determined faces around her. She realized her safety net had collapsed, but she still tried one last desperate move. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just following the prescribed medical protocol for this patient." "What protocol?" Cordero asked, grabbing David's chart. "There's no prescription for this type of medication in his history." It was at that moment that Antonella appeared silently at the room door, holding Maria Jones's hand. The woman carried an envelope with all the photographs she had managed to take the previous night. "Dr. Cordero," Maria Jones said in a trembling but determined voice, "I have some things you need to see." Zelda turned pale upon seeing the photographs of her secret documents being examined by the inspector. Her expression shifted from arrogance to despair in a matter of seconds. "Nurse Morgan," Dr. Sullivan said after examining the evidence, "you are immediately suspended from your duties, and criminal proceedings will be opened against you for extortion, medical negligence, and improper administration of medication." As Zelda was escorted out of the hospital, David felt as if he were waking up from a nightmare. But looking at Antonella, who watched everything with her large, serious eyes, he realized the girl's struggle for survival was only beginning. And it was at that moment that he made the decision that would change both their lives forever. 6 months after Zelda Morgan's arrest, Beacon Hills breathed a different atmosphere. The scandal at St. Serafina Hospital had deeply shaken the textile town, exposing a network of corruption that extended beyond the hospital corridors and reached the office of City Councilman Gus Morgan, who was removed from office after investigations revealed his involvement in his niece's illicit practices. David was in his office at Thompson Textiles, reviewing reports, when Antonella ran in, wearing the school uniform he had bought for her at the start of the school year. Her eyes sparkled with a vibrancy that hadn't existed when they met in the cold hospital hallways. "Daddy David, the teacher said my essay on family was the best in the class," she exclaimed, proudly showing him a paper with an A+. David's heart warmed at hearing the affectionate term Antonella had started using after he finalized her adoption 3 months ago. The process had been complex, involving social workers, psychologists, and bureaucracy that tested both their patience, but it was finally complete. "Can I read it?" David asked, reaching out for the essay. Antonella shyly handed over the paper. "It's about how a real family is formed, not by blood but by mutual love and care." As David read the carefully written words by the girl, his eyes filled with tears. Antonella had described how a sad man and an abandoned girl met in the most unlikely place and discovered they could heal each other's wounds through genuine compassion. "It's perfect," he said, hugging her. "You have a special talent for writing." Just then, David's secretary announced that Dr. Cordero had arrived for Antonella's follow-up appointment. Since the exposure of Zelda's scheme, Fatima had taken over the girl's medical supervision, closely monitoring her physical and emotional recovery. "How is our little miracle doing today?" Fatima asked, entering the office with her maternal smile. "I'm doing great, Dr. Cordero, and look." Antonella proudly showed her essay. Fatima read the text and was visibly moved. During the months of follow-up, she had witnessed the gradual transformation of a traumatized child into a confident and happy girl. "Antonella, I remember when you first came to my office, so thin and scared. Seeing you like this today is the greatest reward I can have as a doctor." As they talked, David reflected on the events that had changed their lives. The investigation following Zelda's arrest revealed the true extent of her criminal network. Dozens of families had been extorted over the years, many losing their savings to ensure adequate care for their sick loved ones. Maria Jones had become a central figure in the hospital's administrative reform. Promoted to supervisor of the cleaning department, she now worked directly with the administration to implement new protocols for transparency and accountability. "Mr. Thompson," Fatima said, interrupting his thoughts, "I need to talk to you about something important." Antonella was distracted, drawing on a sheet of paper, so Fatima took the opportunity to speak in a low voice. Antonella's cardiology exams showed significant improvement. Malnutrition had affected her heart, but with proper care and regular nutrition, she is recovering completely. "And emotionally?" David asked, concerned. "The sessions with the child psychologist have been very positive. Antonella still has occasional nightmares about her time on the streets, but she is developing healthy mechanisms to cope with the trauma. The love and stability you provided made all the difference." David looked at Antonella, who was now drawing birds flying freely on the paper. It was a recurring theme in her drawings, and he understood the symbolism. She had finally found her freedom. "Doctor, can I ask you a personal question? Why did you decide to help us that day?" "You could have ignored my pleas," Fatima smiled sadly. "Because 20 years ago, when I started working at the hospital, I was young and idealistic. Over time, I saw so many injustices that I started accepting them as part of the system. When you approached me, I realized I had become a silent accomplice to all of it. Antonella, and you reminded me why I chose medicine." Just then, the door opened and Maria Jones entered, carrying a tray with coffee and homemade cookies. In recent months, she had become a constant presence in David and Antonella's lives, taking on an almost maternal role with the girl. "Aunt Maria!" Antonella exclaimed, running to hug the woman. "My princess, I brought your favorite cookies," Maria Jones said, returning the embrace tenderly. As everyone settled down for the snack, David observed the scene with deep gratitude. His company had prospered even more after he began implementing social responsibility programs, including partnerships with local shelters and a medical assistance fund for needy employees. "Antonella," David said, "remember when we met at the hospital and you told me people pretended you were invisible?" The girl nodded, munching on a cookie. "Well, tomorrow we are inaugurating the new children's wing at St. Serafina Hospital, and I want you to cut the ribbon with me. Because you are not invisible, you are the most important person in my life." Antonella's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Really, Daddy David? Really? And do you know why we're calling the wing Renewed Hope Wing? Because that's what you brought into my life, renewed hope." Fatima discreetly wiped a tear. As medical director of the new sector, she had worked tirelessly to ensure it was a model of excellence and transparency in pediatric care. "And there's one more surprise," David said, picking up an envelope from his desk. "The confirmation for a full scholarship for you to study at the best private school in Beacon Hills arrived today." Antonella gasped. "But Daddy, I like my current school. You can choose to stay where you are or change. The decision is yours. The important thing is that you have every opportunity you deserve." Maria Jones was moved to see the girl she had found scavenging in the hospital trash, now having access to opportunities she could never have imagined. "Do you know what I learned from all this?" Antonella said thoughtfully. "I learned that family isn't who you're born with, but who chooses to stay with you when everything is hard." Her words deeply touched everyone present. David thought of his first daughter, whom he had abandoned 15 years ago due to financial pressures. Since Antonella's adoption, he had managed to re-establish contact with her, and they were planning to meet in person in the coming weeks. "Daddy David," Antonella said, interrupting his thoughts, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my dear. Do you think my mom would be proud of me now?" David knelt to her level, holding her small hands. "Antonella, I am absolutely sure your mother wouldn't just be proud. She would be grateful to know you found people who love and care for you as you deserve. And you, Daddy, are you proud of me?" "Every day," David replied, embracing her. "You taught me that true love comes from selfless actions, and that the scars of the past can be healed through genuine compassion for others." As the sun set over Beacon Hills, David looked out his office window and saw workers finalizing the installation of the sign for the new hospital wing. Zelda was serving her 5-year prison sentence, and the corrupt system she represented had been completely overhauled. "You know," Fatima said, following his gaze, "sometimes I wonder if Zelda truly understands the harm she caused." "Perhaps one day she will," David replied. "But the important thing is that from the suffering she caused, something beautiful was born, our family." Antonella approached the window and watched people walking on the street. "Daddy David, there's a girl down there who looks lonely." David looked and saw a child about 7 years old, sitting on the sidewalk, clearly homeless. His heart tightened, remembering how he found Antonella. "Do you want us to go down and talk to her?" he asked. "Yes," Antonella exclaimed. "Maybe she needs a family too." As they walked down the stairs together, David smiled, realizing that Antonella had learned the most important lesson of all, that healing one's own suffering often involves alleviating the suffering of others. Outside, Maria Jones and Fatima watched father and daughter approaching the girl on the sidewalk. Both knew they were witnessing the beginning of a new journey of love and redemption. "I think our Antonella is going to be an excellent big sister," Maria Jones commented with a smile. "And David finally found his true calling," Fatima added, "not just as a businessman, but as a father and protector of vulnerable children." That night, as Antonella slept in her room, decorated with drawings of birds flying freely, David reflected on how a 4-year-old girl had completely changed the course of his life. He had started as a bitter, isolated man, and now he was the father of an extraordinary daughter, the leader of a socially responsible company, and a champion for vulnerable children. The suffering they had both faced, she on the streets and in hospitals, he in solitude and guilt, had transformed into purpose, love, and renewed hope. And as the city of Beacon Hills slept peacefully, a new family continued to grow, proving that even in the most unlikely places, genuine love can blossom and transform lives forever. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story by giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.